Good evening, dear guests. Let me give you a very warm welcome. My name is Richard Hockner. I work here, I'm one of the co-founders of Republik magazine, and our editorial office is actually just upstairs. And it is a pleasure to welcome you tonight and to see this bar here, which is our home bar, basically, as a place of public debate. Tonight we are hosting this event on behalf of the Freethinkers Association, and we have some very prestigious guests tonight, and it's a pleasure to see such a full bar tonight. After the event, if you would like to stay, the bar is open, and if you have any questions about Republik and our manifesto, you can also ask me at any time. So wish you a very inspiring and pleasant evening tonight.
Thank you, Richard. Once more, welcome to our Swiss Freethinkers Prize ceremony 2019, and we welcome also all the audience who is watching us via live stream. My name is Nada Beratovic, and I am the board member of the Swiss Freethinkers Association. Since 1900, the Swiss Freethinkers Association has been advocating for a scientific, plausible worldview, for the separation of state and church, and a secular humanist ethics in which human roles play an important role. You can follow us also on Twitter or Facebook, and we have also our website in English, freethought.ch. In 2015, the Swiss Freethinkers Prize was given for the very first time to the Saudi citizens Ensab Haidar and her husband, the famous blogger Raif Badawi, and his attorney Walid Al-Khair for their brave efforts for humanist and secular values in Saudi Arabia. Unfortunately, Raif and Walid are still in prison. In 2017, we honored the Iranian-born Masih Alinejad and her organization My Celtic Freedom for fighting against the Iranian hijab rules. And also we honored the Kurdish painter and journalist Zara Dowen because in her painting she depicted the Turkish flags on destroyed buildings of the town Nisabin in Turkey. She was then in prison, but now she is free. These Swiss Freethinkers Prize show that we honored till now activists for their commitment, for their work, for open and humanist society. And this year we wanted to honor artists and writers. We want to honor their work for an enlightened world. We want to honor their art and especially defending freedom of art and expression. So please, I want to introduce you to Andreas Kyriacou, our president, who will now tell.
Yes, hello and welcome from my side as well. As you heard, so far we've been giving the prize, the award to activists. Their work is very important, but sometimes it's also very essential that others pick up what humanists have to say. And one way to spread the message is, of course, through art, through culture. And one format is film. And now I would like to welcome our first awardee, Barbara Miller, to the stage. So this is our award. Just so that you have something to take home, something more to take home, here are the flowers.
Thank you so much.
There are two very good reasons why you very much deserve this award. They're called Female Pleasure, your most recent film, and Forbidden Voices. In both films, you portrayed women who stood up against regimes, against communities that suppressed them, that harmed them. In the first film, Forbidden Voices, you portrayed political dissidents from Iran, from China, and Cuba. And now in your most recent film, Female Pleasure, you show how religion often plays an important role in suppressing women, in allowing harm against women. And of course, we that normally take a critical view on religion, we very much appreciate that you look at the dark side that religion also has, and that the more problematic forms of organized religion. But in your film, you also show that religion can probably not always be singled out as the reason why women are suppressed, why there is violence against women. Very often religion and culture are very, very closely connected, and we'll be speaking about this. Do you want to say a few words, and then we'll go on the stage?
Yeah, thank you very much. I feel really, really honored to receive this prize, especially also together with Salman Rushdie, which is incredible. And I really want to dedicate this prize to these courageous women in my two films who, without their courage and without their fearless way of fighting against fundamentalism, be it in the political systems, be it in religion, I mean, I would have never ever been able to realize these films. So, yeah, thank you very much. It's really incredible to receive this prize.
Please take a seat. You will be our guest again on Sunday, where we will show Female Pleasure, and we'll be able to have a chat about the film and about the women you portrayed there. So let's talk a bit more about your first film, but one thing I'm curious about, you studied law,
Yeah.
which seems like a good way to support individuals that are threatened by political systems, a good way to support the fight for human rights. How come you switched to filmmaking?
Yeah, I studied law, but I also studied psychology, philosophy, and film. And when I finished my degree here in Zurich, I realized that if I really want to fight for justice in a maybe bigger way than just for individuals, film could be a chance to do so. And then I tried with film. I started learning with Christian Frey, the film war photographer. There it's where I learned how to do documentaries, and then I continued, and yeah, till today. I never went back, but for me, doing films has a lot to do with fighting for justice, fighting for human rights.
Well, you didn't just try, you succeeded.
Thank you.
The first film, which portrays these three courageous women from Iran, from Cuba, and
China.
From China.
Yeah.
How much of an impact has it had on the life of these three women? We can look back a bit now. Your film is from 2012.
Yeah.
So what has happened?
I mean, it was interesting. I was just thinking about it in the last days. And the Ioannis Sanchez, after we published the film, she was never ever able to travel. And we also had this topic in our film. And with the pressure of the film and the public awareness it made, some months later, the government allowed her for the first time after years to travel. And what was really interesting, she was traveling, she got a lot of prizes all over the world, a lot of invitations, but she came back. She came back to Cuba because she said, if I really can make an impact, it's in Cuba. It's not nowhere else in the world. And she funded a free press, only on the internet, because if she would have printed, she would have gone to jail again. So it's called 14 and a half, because she's living on the 14th floor. And she said, this is like my base, and from there I try to change the world. And yeah, I think in a way she always told me, I will do this only if it's only an online journal, but I want to do it because when the moment comes that the Cuban system will change, it's so important that we already have journalists and people who know how to really do objective, free-thinking journalism, which is not yet reality in Cuba. So I think she really did a lot of important steps to continue her fight. And I mean, it would have been so easy for her after she finally had the possibility to travel to say, okay. I mean, she once lived in Switzerland, so a lot of years ago. So she could have said, oh, I'm going to Switzerland, and that's it. But she really went back. And I mean, the situation in Cuba hasn't really profoundly changed. But at least there are now journalists being ready to fight for good journalism and for free thinking in this way. And Farna Saifi from Iran, she was already living in exile, and it was really sad because she was working for Deutsche Welle, but she got extremely sick, and she was fighting for, I don't know, maybe almost 3 or 4 years for her survival, her personal survival. And today she's living in Washington, D.C., and she overcome this incredible thing which everyone thought she will die from it. Yeah. And we're in contact, not so often, but we are still in contact, and I really hope to see her now that I'm going with #FemalePleasure to the US. And the third one is Zheng Xingyang. The thing was, while I was filming with her, I mean, I never ever had the chance to meet her personally. We were really, she was under house arrest, and we were outside her home in China, me with my cameraman, but there were always these guards 24 hours, so we didn't manage to meet her personally, but we managed to get some material from her. That's how it was possible. People helped us to get material. That's how it was possible to do the film. And only more than a year later, after the film was finished, I finally had the chance to meet her. No, I think it was 1.5, almost 2 years, because there was an incident. She was living with her little daughter, who was born while she was under house arrest, and her husband was released. He was in prison, and the husband was beaten up by the security guards in front of the daughter, and the daughter was already like 2 years old, and she realized that something is really not going right with her parents, that the situation is extremely strange. And then Zheng Xingyang, I also helped her to really do a huge petition to tell the world that they really have to help her to bring her daughter out. And the Chinese government felt the pressure and told her that she's able to leave to Hong Kong to study together with her daughter, but she had to separate from her husband, like showing that she's not supporting his cause anymore. Of course, she continued to support his cause and fighting for human rights, but she's separate, and now they're living in Hong Kong, and that's how, together with Amnesty International, we did a screening there, and that's how we finally were able to meet.
Wonderful. That's one thing I also wanted to ask. How free were you to film, to take scenes on site?
It was really extremely difficult. I mean, In Cuba, I have been often to Cuba, so I knew a little bit how it worked, but Ioannis Sanchez were also under surveillance the whole time. So yeah, we were able to go to her house. Sometimes we just met somewhere outside, but always when we came back to the apartment where we lived, me and the cameraman, we did like 5-6 copies, and we gave the copies to other people because we never knew if they will come and make, destroy all our material. And once we managed to film with Ioanni at a beachside in Havana, we really entered the car. In this moment, there came like 3 police cars. They really searched the whole place. Everyone had to show his passport, and we just stayed in the car and didn't move. So it was like, it was always this feeling of not knowing how safe it is. And in China, yeah, as I said, I mean, we were there as tourists. That was the only way. It would have never been possible to get a permission to film with dissidents. So we were there as tourists, but we didn't manage to get in contact. I mean, we got in contact through other channels, but never ever personally. And in Iran, I mean, Farnas Saifi was living already in exile. So we decided that in the end, only the cameraman went alone to do some images in Iran, and he was arrested twice. But we were working together with Reporters Without Borders in France. So we had like a huge setup to help him in case that it would have gone worse, because there was, I think it were 2 Americans who went to Iran in the same time. It was just after the uprising and the demonstrations, and they were caught, and they had to stay like half a year. They tried to free them, so we were really kind of afraid that something could happen to our cameraman, but they in the end believed that he was just a tourist. Strangely, being at these places where the most important thing happened some months ago, but yeah, we were really lucky.
And do you think today in any of these 3 countries you would have the same chances? You said nothing much has changed in Cuba. What about Iran? What about China? With this view on culture, on filmmaking. I mean, we of course all hear the news that local dissidents are taken to court, put into jail. How much freedom do people coming from outside have? Has anything changed?
I don't think so. I mean, I just read about Hu Jia, who's the husband of Zheng Jinzheng, that in 2018, I mean, he's still living under house arrest. Officially, he's not, but he's not able to move. He's not able to travel. He still has to be always in his apartment. In 2018, when there was the meeting of the party, he was deported to the countryside so that he could never ever do anything or say anything, I mean, without internet and everything. So I think the situation has not changed at all, unfortunately. I mean, I think there are so many people which we have seen in this time when blogging started, because for me, I did the movie because I really felt this force or this possibility of simple people just telling about their real life, what is really happening on the ground. They reached out to the world, but unfortunately, we didn't manage or till now to change the system. And I mean, in China, what I was also showing in the film was how the censorship was working already then, and I think it even got worse. And now we have Russia, who has not, again, like China, not the same in Iran. It's not the internet, but it's an intranet. Also in Cuba, means all the information the people are getting, if they're not going through proxies and know how to do it, it's just the thing that the government wants. And I mean, yeah, there's not much freedom of thinking. And just a little anecdote, when I was with the film with Forbidden Voices in America at a festival, there were 2 young Chinese students, and after the film they came to me and they said, "What? Are you sure that the Tiananmen massacre, this really happened in China? We have never ever heard a single word about it. How can it be?" And then we told them, please go here, try here in the internet, and you will find a lot of information. Yeah, it's really, it shows how these realities are created.
So at least they were genuine students. I work for, well, it's a volunteer task for an NGO at the Human Rights Court, and there's a high presence of Chinese citizens there, but they're all in scam NGOs run by the state. So if you at least manage through your films to make people aware, coming from these countries, that the truth is rather one-sided, that is being told, that's already, I guess, a great impact of your films. Your more recent film, I think we still have to talk about it, even though we will have another chance on Sunday to chat. How come you picked up the sort of core theme of religion for your film, Female Pleasure?
I mean, it started when I traveled a lot, and I was really wondering why today in 21st century, if we talk with women about sexuality, about how they feel as women, it's much more about obligation, even much about pain and not about pleasure. And I was really wondering where it comes from. And I did a lot of researches, and I found in the 5 world religion, these texts which are always in the film, that are telling us that women are sinful, the female body is demonized, female sexuality brings all the sins and all the bad things in the world. And starting with that, I was looking for 5 women from this 5 world religion, world cultures. I think the boundaries are shifting a lot. And to tell their story and their view and their way of fighting against, in a way, this misuse of religion, to tell them that there are that half of humanity is not worth it, that half of humanity has less value, that the female body is a negative thing, and that we have to feel ashamed that we are women. And yeah, it was, for me, it was really interesting to do this journey and to see that still today, also in our societies, if we look at the situation of female sexuality, the view of the female body, so many of these ideas of this, let's say, patriarchal interpretation of the religious scriptures are still vivid, and we don't even realize it, because yeah, often we're living in secular societies and modern societies, but a lot of these ideas are still here. So yeah, that's why I started with this, with the religion, to go into religion, to see maybe where it comes from. But what I didn't, I never ever got an answer if religion was based, it was the religion who implemented this idea, or if it was patriarchy who then interpreted the religion in this way. So yeah, it was like, I hoped I would find an answer, but with all the expertise, someone said no, it was religion. A lot told me religion in the beginning wasn't against women. Often also Deborah Feldman, for example, from Judaism, or Leila Hussein in Islam, they studied a lot, and they said there were a lot of strong women originally in their religions, but they all have been silenced. They're out of the story, they don't exist anymore. So it was interesting to be in between these 2 possibilities.
I think one thing which is impressive from your film, it shows that it's not just the monotheistic religions, the Abrahamic religions that clearly give different roles to men and women, but that even in cultural or religiously formed societies that do not have this one clearly male god that controls everything, that even in cultures where you have different deities and also important female deities, that nevertheless this clear preference for male dominance, for controlling sexuality exclusively of women that goes through all cultures.
Yeah, for me to realize these parallels. Also, if we talk about Hinduism, the fundamentalistic part of Hinduism, also if we talk about Buddhism, like it's interpreted in China or in Japan, coming from China, it's incredible. For me, it was really shocking to realize it, that it's all over this idea, yeah, that the female body is sinful, and that because we are women bringing all these sins to the world through our body. I mean, you could think that, yeah, maybe the female body, maybe once it was worshipped because we were able to bring life. But to see this ability as a negative thing is really, wow, it was eye-opening for me.
One of the more uncomfortable claims from Buddhism is that it's an intended punishment to be born as a woman. So.
Yeah, in the Japanese way of interpreting this Buddhism, it said if you want to have enlightenment, your body has to change in a male body, because impossible with a female body to be enlightened.
Let's talk a bit about your upcoming film project. You have announced that you want to make a film on male sexuality.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience while doing #female pleasure. I often came across also in a way like the pressure being on women, on men, be it from religion, be it from society, from all these stereotypes, and often the reaction of men who went to see #female pleasure, they said, oh, it's interesting, for the first time I realize really what it means to be a woman today. But on the other hand, men also often told me that they never talk about male sexuality. They never talk about their fears. They never talk about the pressure they're under, about all these stereotypes they have to cope with. And I think if we really start openly to talk about this taboo, I think not only the sexual relation in between men and women will improve, but a lot of other things also will improve. And I really feel like I want to go into this topic and find out more, and maybe really start a discussion about it.
Do you think that the role of faiths, sort of clarifying from their view how a male should act, how he has to perceive his sexuality, is as important, or is faith maybe not as much as a factor to define this superior role of men? Have you already started digging into the subject? In your film, Female Pleasure, you clearly show that religion probably, even though it's unclear what came first, that at least religion certainly acts to keep this differentiating the roles of females and males. And do you think because most religions sort of give preference to the man, they clearly make men the leader in family but also in society, that faith plays an equally important role, or is it just sort of the patriarchic system that we have probably all over the world that helps men to have easier careers, to dominate women?
I think in this film, faith or religion, I think faith is often a personal thing, but the religion or the thing that's told, this is tradition, you have in the name of religion, will play not such an important role, but of course it's also one part of it. I mean, if you think about all the pressures and all the sayings by religion, also our religion, if you masturbate as a man, you're going to be blind, and all these beliefs, I mean, yeah, they're for sure making a lot of pressure on men also. And if you think about how a lot of even more fundamentalistic way of using religion that of course sexuality is often seen as negative, in a way that the God is so jealous that the man shouldn't love women, but he should love in the end only God. I think, yeah, it's for sure there, but it's not so in the center of, or let's say in the base like it was for me in #female pleasure.
Okay. So how long do we have to wait for your next film?
Oh, this is always a good question. I mean, when you start with the film, you always think like, yeah, it will take 2-3 years. #female pleasure took me 5 years. So I really hope it will be quicker, but you never know. You know, it depends on financing. It depends on so many things. It depends on how you want to work with protagonists. With #female pleasure, for me, it was important that it's their story and that I follow them and their important issues, and not that I say, oh, we could do this or let's go there. And this needs time.
So you will also be portraying individuals, telling their stories.
I guess so, because in a way it's my way of telling bigger things or the global issues. I think for me it's important to that the audience has a possibility to connect with individuals and really feel their personality and their story. And yeah, I think this connection, this feeling is very important to understand. I think a lot of understanding, of course, it goes through the head, but a lot also goes through the heart. So for me, portraying individuals always gives us also possibility to see our own story and our own difficulties or beautiful things in life. Yeah, so it probably will make the same way.
Sounds very interesting, something we can all look forward to. At the moment, female pleasure is still keeping you busy. You're off to the States. It's now running in the States. And you've submitted for the Academy Award. So hopefully sometime soon you can place an Oscar next to your Rodin figure.
I mean, we're outsiders, and running for the Oscar, for me, it makes sense because I really want to spread the word. I really want to spread the message in a way that the fight of these women, but also the positive message that change is possible through this film. And if we reach with, doing this campaign, more people, if we reach to spread the word, to change the situation for women and girls worldwide, that really it changes to positive, then that's for me the goal. And then I really have this feeling of having got an Oscar without, having got an Oscar. But that's my motivation to do it.
Well, from our audience, you certainly got the award, the recognition. I do hope it also works out for the Academy Awards. And I wish you a lot of luck, not just with that contest, but also all the best for your next film. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And now I'll hand back to Nada, because we've got one guest more.
Hello. I want to call Mr. Rushdie, here, to come. Ich gebe ihm das. Aber du sagst schon, was ich weiß nichts mehr. Okay. Nein, ich sage nur. Thank you. Here is the prize, the Swiss Freethinker Prize. Switzerland wouldn't be without chocolate. I think I don't want to ask, what do you like more?
Oh, I think I always wanted a little Rodin.
Thank you very much.
We knew that you've got Vienna upcoming as your, I think, final tour of the German-speaking world.
Yes.
So we also thought that a box of chocolate would be a bit easier to carry around than
Perfect. Thank
than
you.
flowers.
No, thank you. I like chocolate, and I know what chocolate means to the Swiss.
It's a semi-religious thing.
Okay. Yeah, chocolate and watches.
So, before you were here, you had a very busy day. You've been giving interviews all day, so we very much appreciate that you found the time to come here.
Thank you.
I already mentioned that after having awarded activists, humanist activists from different countries, we now decided another important role that people with humanist ideals take is to spread the word through their means. One, of course, is film. You, in your books, you look at our society, you criticize things that are going wrong, and you very often include bits and pieces of religion in your books. And of course, you are a humanist, as we all know. You are a patron of Humanist UK, our sister organisation.
Yes.
So there are so many reasons to award you the prize. We, of course, also very much appreciate that you have always defended freedom of speech. So, again, a warm welcome and applause for you for all the work you've done for decades.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now let's talk a bit about your book.
All right.
Without giving too much away of the plot, everyone who's not bought one yet should do so afterwards. And you're, of course, reading from your book afterwards in the Volkshaus, and I guess almost everyone will be joining.
Okay.
All right. One organisational thing, we don't have time for you to sign books here, but you'll be at the Volkshaus, and everyone who has already bought the book here have a head start in the queue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, your book is about an elderly, rather lonely salesman who falls in love with a TV star and thinks he can somehow manage to steal her heart.
Yeah.
And that becomes a quest for him, and he believes so that he can't really reveal his full personality, so he comes up with this alter ego. He calls himself Quichotte and starts to write her letters. He also believes that he cannot do this all by himself, so he gets himself a companion, Sancho, obviously, and it's sort of the son he never had. Initially, it's a piece of cardboard in full size at the back of the car, through with which he does his journey on this quest. And all of a sudden, this son, this invented figure, comes to life and starts to talk in first person, which is an interesting twist in the story. And this Sancho, knowing that he has only just come to life, he doesn't have a past, he doesn't have a mother, he starts to ponder about the world. And he, for example, is aware that he doesn't seem to have conscience when his father is asleep, a bit like in the Avatar film, that the thought-up figure is always dependent on the creator, as he calls him. When I read, and he also thinks, well, there might be another being around, some sort of presence, of someone maybe who invented that father figure. So Sancho in the book starts to have thoughts that most individuals probably have about the role in life, and starts to ponder about what maybe also comforts people who have religious beliefs. And when I was reading this chapter about midway through the book, I thought you as the creator of the creator of the created, sort of the bottommost turtle, maybe. Did you always have this dialogue already in mind, thinking about what makes people be fascinated about belief, what kind of comfort they might find in, or did this figure in your writing of the book sort of come to life and gave you this dialogue?
Well, it is more that he told me what to do, which is what I always hope happens with characters, that once they have a real existence of their own, it's more a question of listening to what they need than forcing them to do things.
So you're a very liberal creator.
Yeah, they don't completely have free will. I mean, in the end, they have to do what I say. But I give them the illusion of free will. As we all have. But I was actually very happy about Sancho because he developed in a way that was quite unexpected in many ways. And to me, he was the most interesting character to write in the book, especially when he begins to, he's aware of his, in a way, fictitious nature, because he's been brought into being by an act of magic, and knows that he is essentially imaginary, but he's very, very anxious to be real, and so the question of reality and what it is and how it works is the thing that really centrally preoccupies him. And then, as you say, he begins to intuit that behind the character of his supposed father, there's maybe another creator, and that gives him thoughts about God. Although he's quite suspicious of the idea of God, but he senses this entity, and I mean, he doesn't know that the entity is me.
You've not revealed yourself
No,
to him.
no. Otherwise, he would give up the idea of God quite quickly. But yeah, it became a way for me to write about how people have a sense of transcendence, of something beyond their knowledge and beyond their comprehension. And to write about that sympathetically, if you like. I mean, this is also, in Cervantes' great novel, in the second part of Don Quixote, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza become aware of the fact that they're characters in books. And not only are they self-conscious as characters in books, they have very strong opinions about the books that they're in. So they like Cervantes' genuine Don Quixote, but there are all these fake Don Quixotes that people have been writing, and they're very, very contemptuous of being in those bad books. They want to be in the good book. And this idea that Cervantes had 400 years ago, that a fictional character can become aware of his fictionality, is not so unlike human self-consciousness. I mean, one of the things that separates human beings from other creatures on the earth, is that we have the gift of self-consciousness. We know that we are ourselves, and that's an amazing quality, because it allows us to be both ourselves and to stand outside ourselves and look at ourselves. And as far as we know, there's nobody else, no other creature on the earth that can do this. So self-consciousness has something very central to do with humanity, with who we are. And of course, self-consciousness, one step forward, becomes the humanistic belief that we have, that the self is an autonomous entity which controls itself. And out of this comes Renaissance humanism and everything else. So anyway, so it all starts with Don Quixote beginning to understand that somebody's writing him, and the history of Europe flows from that fact. So anyway, yes, it was interesting to have a variation of that when it becomes this young fellow, kind of a teenage kid, who begins to intuit these things. And I'm happy to say that so far, I mean, the 3 months or 3.5 months since the book came out, it seems clear that from readers' responses that Sancho is everybody's favorite character. Because he's this sort of terrible teenage lout. but he has a sort of deep side.
Definitely. And he feels disadvantaged, so he seems to sort of, that's how I read it, fight for his role in the book.
Yeah, he wants to. I mean, I've said before, but he is, in a way, more like Pinocchio than Sancho Panza. Because in Pinocchio, the woodcarver Geppetto, who doesn't have a child, carves a child out of wood, and then the wooden child comes to life. And throughout the story, Pinocchio's great desire is to be a real boy, not to be a wooden puppet, but to be a real boy. And I'm now not talking about Walt Disney. In that impossibly ancient time before Walt Disney, there was a novel called Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, and that was what I was thinking about, really. So in my novel, Sancho makes friends with a talking cricket, but the cricket speaks Italian. Because he's a cricket from a novel, not from a movie. He doesn't have a stupid hat and umbrella. He's just a cricket.
So you'll have to read it.
Yes.
Not giving away all the plot. In the book, Sancho also says he sometimes wakes up in a different place than he went to sleep because it's his father driving at night, and then all of a sudden his consciousness starts off in a new place, and says, well, maybe this religion thing is something that gives people comfort because you don't want the place that you went to sleep to be a different one than where you wake up. You want the world to be controlled. From an excerpt of an interview on the Humanist UK site, you talk a bit about how you sort of, and I believe it was gradual, you distanced yourself from religious beliefs.
Yeah, it wasn't that gradual, actually. No, because I was lucky in many ways in that I was brought up in a family that wasn't very religious, in Bombay. A thing that was not as unusual then as it is now. I mean, my father was, I don't think I ever heard a religious belief coming out of his mouth. And my mother's religious belief went no further than that we should not eat pig. So we had a kind of, our religion was basically against pigs.
Well, from the pig's point of view, maybe very much in favour.
Yes, I think that pigs benefited from this. But that was really it, I mean, and so I grew up without having really strong religion pushed down my throat. And I remember, leaving Bombay, being sent to boarding school in England, and going to the school canteen shop, and buying myself a ham sandwich in order to disprove the existence of God. I ate the ham sandwich and nothing happened. There was no thunderbolt, etc. And at that moment I thought I had proved the non-existence of God. And have thought so ever since, really. So
we, of course, are very much aware that at least organized religion hasn't treated you very well.
You heard that?
Yeah. Somewhere, yes, on the internet.
All right, yeah.
So this feeling of comfort that Sancho reflects on is not something that you would say was ever a part
No,
of you.
no, it
yourself.
really wasn't. I mean, I just have always, I think it has to do with having grown up in this way in a very secular household. But I've never felt the need of it. You know, I mean, I understand that some people do. You know, that especially in a world that is very uncertain right now and is transforming very fast, and in all sorts of ways, people don't like very rapid change often. You know, it panics people. And they can reach out for something that feels like it's not changing. It's sort of eternal, you know. And that can be like a piece of wood to hold on to in the flood, you know. And I think that religion does do that for some people. It offers them that sense of comfort and continuity in a world which is changing very fast and is often kind of discontinuous, you know. So, I mean, I get it. I just don't need it, you know. So that's not. I mean, let me put it this way. I think to my mind, the reasons for religion was to answer two of the great questions of life. One is, where do we come from? And the other is, now that we're here, how shall we live? So the question of origins and the question of ethics. You know. And it seems to me, as far as the question of origins is concerned, that all religions are quite simply wrong. That's not what happened. You know? And so I don't look at a religion, whether it's, I mean, some of these are beautiful stories, you know. You know, the Hindu story of the god Indra churning the primal soup in a great churn, and out of that comes the universe, you know. It's kind of, I mean, it's an attractive story, you know. The Nordic story of the cow, Audumla, asleep at the bottom of a bottomless pit, having a bad dream, tossing and turning, and the friction of her udders against the rocks creates life, creates giants, you know. And I mean, as a writer, I love these stories, you know, but I don't believe them, you know. So the question of origins, I think we have better places to look than religion, you know. And as far as ethics is concerned, religious people will often say to you that without a kind of primary creator who validates the moral system, you can't live a moral life. You know? But it seems to me that that's getting things the wrong way around. I mean, it seems to me that men created gods and religions in order to codify their moral sense, in order to express what they thought, how they thought the world should be. So it's the other way around. That our moral sense comes before religion, not as a consequence of it. And I mean, you know, frankly, I think ethics is a constantly evolving thing. You know, it's a thing that changes as the world changes. So there was a time in the United States when people thought it was okay to have slaves. And then it was, at the end of a very painful war, it was agreed that that was not okay. You know, and so on. So our ethical sense develops, you know, and it's an argument. And I'd prefer for a society to establish its ethics in that process of debate and argument, instead of looking to a priest to tell us. Because look what priests get up to. You know, all sorts of stuff which is not very ethical. Ask the Pope about this, he knows a lot. So, you know, I don't look to religion to answer these questions, because it seems to me there are better places to look, you know, and so it doesn't cut it for me.
Well, I guess the audience here can fully
I know, I'm
follow
sure you all agree. I mean, you know, you're sitting, you're in complete darkness, but I suspect that you're probably not fanatical religious people. Just a guess.
Yeah, I would guess the same.
Yeah.
One sentence you said, men created gods
Yeah.
to define the morals. I assume Barbara Miller would understand men exclusively as males.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I should.
This is
I have old-fashioned vocabulary.
What her film shows.
People.
No,
But it might have been men, actually.
I assume that men had a greater role in pinning down these stories.
Well, one of the things that's interesting in Hindu cosmology is that the male gods represent essence and the female gods represent action. So the men are and the women do. Yeah, which is not such a bad picture, actually. So if you're Brahma or Shiva or Krishna, you just sit there. And if you're, Parvati or Saraswati or whatever, you're doing everything and making lunch. So I think it's interesting that Hinduism has that distinction. That the what is called Shakti, which is the dynamic power of the gods, the active power of the gods, is located in the female deity. And essence is located in the male deity. So, it's just interesting that people come up with this stuff, which seems to have some relationship to real life.
So, would you say that India is run by women acting?
Well, India had a woman leader, which is something the United States hasn't managed to do. She wasn't like the best thing in the world, but nor were the men. No, I think actually, to be serious, I think the condition of women in India right now is very problematic, very dangerous. There has been, you will have read in the papers, this kind of rape epidemic, and in in the big cities, but not only in the big cities, and one of the things about rape, which is like murder, is that it's almost always an intimate crime. It's almost always somebody you know. It's not a stranger. It can be, and sometimes it is, but more often it's a family member. It's a father or an uncle or and that means there's a lot of shame around it, and so it's not talked about, and therefore it goes unpunished. But I also think it's because this young generation of women in India is a very emancipated generation. It's a generation that doesn't want to be stuck in traditional roles. It wants to be able to. They want to be able to make their own lives as they see fit. And I think for a lot of Indian men, that is frightening. And the rape thing is a way of trying to push them back into their place. And it is really, really alarming what's happening. It used to be, a lot of Indian cities were safe for women at night, and now I think they're not really, So there is, I think that realistically women don't have anything like the independence and power in Indian society that they have in Indian cosmology.
Sad, but still good to hear that you see a generation of women fighting for their rights.
I think no
One
question.
is portrayed in the film Female Pleasure.
Yes. I think no question. I think that's something that people in India would not dissent with. But the question is, how do you react to that? Do you react by celebrating it, or do you react by trying to oppress it, destroy it? And unfortunately, a certain percentage of Indian men is reacting violently.
You take up the topic of violence in your book as well.
Yeah.
One thing, one maybe last topic I would briefly want to touch that you also mention in the book is the blurring of fiction and reality. Of course, with these invented figures pondering about their lives, the blurring between what actually is and what people imagine is part of the story. But you also look about the blurring of information that people get access to through media. One thing which has changed drastically in the past 2 decades, say, is how information can be distributed.
Yes.
And of course, for us who are trying to fight for humanist activists, we very much appreciate the role of the internet,
yes.
because people can make their stories known, they can voice their ideas, they can exchange ideas with people they might not know, but at the same time the internet is of course also a huge source of misinformation. Do you have...
yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that, is that it's both things at once. You know, that,
so is it in the end, from your estimation, a net benefit, or has it made things worse?
I mean, I think, you know, the internet is a tool. You know, it has no moral quality. You know, I mean, a hammer is a tool, which if you use it to hammer a nail is useful. If you use it to hit somebody on the head is not useful. You know, so the question is about how you use the tool. You know, and there's clearly, as you say, and there are enormous benefits to be derived from this new information technology. You know, but the worry is that what we have is quantities of garbage which coexist side by side with very valuable information. And they both look the same. You know, they both look like they have the same kind of authority. And that's where the confusion arises. That's where, you know, the kind of the page telling you that you mustn't vaccinate your children because it's bad for them looks just as good as a page of information as the page of genuine medical information, you know, and then you have, you know, celebrities on the garbage page endorsing the garbage, you know, and it becomes even harder, I think, for at least for some people, to distinguish, you know, between the right and the wrong information, and I think that's the problem, very broadly across the internet, that the garbage and the valuable stuff are sort of both there without any method of distinguishing between them. And so it gives us we live in a confused time, you know, and I think for any community or society that if you don't know how to work out what is right and what is truthful and what is untruthful, you know, it's dangerous, because it allows people who are unscrupulous about the truth to do well, you know, to convince substantial numbers of people that their garbage is the truth, you know, and we all see the effects of that every day around us. So I mean, the novel lives in that reality. It lives in that reality, and the question is, you know, if you're a novelist, you're in the business of making shit up. You know? So I mean, everything I say is made up. You know, and there's a lot of people who say, well, what's the difference? You know, you're making things up too, and you know, and I mean, the answer to that is, there's a long answer to that, but the short answer to that is that there's a difference between fiction and lies, and to put it simply, it is that the purpose of art is to tell the truth. Whatever the means that we can use surreal or realistic techniques, but the purpose of art is to say something that the reader will recognize as true about human beings. This is what we're like. This is what we do. This is how we behave with each other. This is what's wonderful in our behavior. This is what's terrible. And these are the societies we build, and this is how they work, etc. That's what literature is always trying to do, is try to show you the truth. You know? And lies, of course, are a way of obscuring the truth. So in fact, in an age of lies, which I think is the age we live in, paradoxically, it may be a valuable thing to have literature around trying desperately to tell the truth. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we'll take that as a
exit line.
Exit line, a final word. We know very much that I would say as humanists that the arts are a very important aspect of human life, and that artists, writers have a great role to play. They inform us exactly through showing where society goes awry. It's been a great pleasure, and I hope you continue with writing new novels, new fiction for decades more.
Oh,
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, for the people watching on the live stream, we'll end it here. I just want to say thank you very much to the Republik for hosting us, to the Rothaus Bar, the place you are actually now, to our two guests. Of course, you will have to stay for a second more to take some pictures. And also to our two technicians, one invisible behind here and the other one sitting too. The whole evening with regards to text was run by women, just so that you know. And of course also a warm welcome and thank you for everyone who was here and is here. As you know, the bar is still open, but everyone who wants now to rush over to the Volkshaus to get a good seat, enjoy the second half of the evening.